Hi, this is Marcus Felson saying hello to Cynthia Lum's class. And I'm not sure even the title of class, but my guess is you want to know something about routine activities and a little bit about the development. And I'm going to start talking, and I have no particular plan and no notes. Um, and we were just in a flood, so that is, our house was, and we were in it. And I won't tell you that story, but I will tell you a story of where routine activities came from and a little bit that maybe would help your class. And I don't know, you have to decide. But first of all, it was, let's see, the end, it was the 70s, about 1977, when Ken Land joined the faculty at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and he was studying social trends and cycles. And I joined his project, and he had a grant, and then later we got a grant together, and so on. And he was the organizer, but he turned over the topic of crime to me, mainly because he wasn't at that time interested in crime and interested in studying it. So I tried to figure out what the driving force was for change, annual change in crime for the period 1947 to 1974 or 5 or 6, something like that. And it turns out that the usual sociological theories did not work, did not help us understand crime. Turns out that crime was increasing during a period of prosperity, not poverty. There was not increasing inequality. There were none of the usual variables. Supposedly race was related, but it turns out that the black share of the population increased from 10% to 11%, while the crime rates were increasing 400, 500, 6, those kinds of dramatic increases. And so the usual theories were not working. And so I formulated the routine activity approach. But what I found is that, of course, the age structure, everyone was saying, well, it's the age structure, there are more young men, etc. But it turns out there was only a 30% increase in the number of young people, but there were these 400, 500, 300% increases in different crime rates. So it couldn't just be the offenders, or there are more young people, hence more offenders. Then I looked and I saw that, there are more victims also who are young. And so if there are more offenders and victims, maybe this multiplies. If you've got more youths, reaching the teenage years, the baby boom started to turn 14, 15, 16, etc. During the period when the crime wave occurred, which was namely after 1963. And what I then thought is, well, we can't talk about victims with only we have to think about targets, because a lot of offenders are looking for a prime target, and they don't care about you. They just want your money or your house or whatever you have, your car, so really, I thought we better separate the victim from, stop using the word victim, and split up target and guardian. So we have offender, target, guardian, 3 elements. And I also decided best to talk about direct contact predatory crimes, that is, crimes, only talk about predatory crimes where there's a clear offender and victim, or where somebody's innocent and somebody guilty, and only to talk about those involving direct physical contact, not to include crimes like phone crime or phone threats or remote, anything that's by remoteness, not to include fights where both parties could be guilty. If 2 people are fighting, they could be equally guilty. Not to include cooperative crimes, like if I sell illegal drugs to you and you willingly buy them, that's not a predatory crime. So I didn't want to include that. And over time, we began to understand that we could explain the crime waves quite well, using the crime rate, the crime wave, using this, and also looking at some basic indicators that were highly tangible. My thinking is always highly tangible, or I try to be highly tangible, to stick pretty close to the physical world. And that's what the point of routine activity approach is. I call it an approach rather than a theory because it's a middle level theory. That is a theory of the middle range. If you look up Merton's concept of middle range theory, it's not a grand theory, so I called it an approach. And it is not, I couldn't call it opportunity theory because that was, opportunity was a word already taken by Clara Nolan. I couldn't call it a lifestyle theory. I decided not to call it lifestyle theory because lifestyles, at least at that time, implied sexual and drug sorts of choices that individuals make, whereas I wanted to say something a little different. I was not just saying that people may take risky lifestyle, make risky choices in their lifestyle, because often the crime risks you take are in the context of conventional activities that are perfectly acceptable and desirable, such as going out and working or going to school. And so, as we learned more and more about this, we were able to piece together quite a bit. And one thing I insisted on is that we explain variations both at the micro and macro level, in terms of time series, in terms of cross-sectional variations, in terms of individual variations, in terms of everything that all the data should point to the same conclusion. And that happened. We were able to show that the crime rate trends not only could be explained with routine activity variables, but the composition of crime changed accordingly. So that, for example, daytime burglary gave way. Nighttime, it used to be burglary was in the nighttime. Cat burglars climbing in your window and so on. That has long been gone because what happened is as females entered the labor force, they were gone during the day. So the burglars would enter during the daytime, and the daytime burglary replaced nighttime burglary. And there were a number of other compositional changes in crime that reflected the routine activity patterns and the shifts in routine activities. So we made quite a bit of progress in this. Also, over the year, a lot of people read the routine activity thing and they read the 1979 paper and all this, but they forget that there are lots and lots of things since then that elaborate and widen the theory to cover more and more topics. Some by me, some by others. I urge you to look at work by Danielle Reynald, Reynald, on guardianship in action. She's elaborated guardianship, and she's added quite a bit in that area. And she's books and articles on that. And I urge you to look at recent work on cybercrime in terms of routine activities. And in each of these cases, it's widening the theory, applying it in a different way, going beyond direct contact crimes, etc. More and more, they're going beyond. We've gone beyond predatory crimes. We being a number of people. I also want to say that originally the routine activity paper did not offer a policy suggestion because the idea was the routine activities shifted to produce more crime or less on a basis that had nothing to do with policy or wasn't. You couldn't do much policy control. But since that time, I've became much more aware of work by Ron Clark, and over the years realized that situational crime prevention and routine activities are really two parts of the same argument, and that indeed you can reduce crime greatly by focusing on situations where crime is prevalent and reducing those situations, making it harder to carry out illegal acts. And I urge everyone who's listening to look at popcenter.org online to find out how you reduce crime in a very focused way. The interesting thing is this is all about focus. Criminology tends to get lost in the lack of focus. It tends to study unfocused all crime together, or maybe two categories, whereas we tend to look at crime in very focused ways. For example, auto theft, we consider maybe 6, 7, 8 types of auto theft. Joyriding is one. Stealing a car to get home at night. Stealing a car to strip the parts. Just stealing one part. Stealing the contents. Stealing a car to carry out a felony. That's 6. Stealing a car joyride is just for fun. Stealing a car for export or to take it abroad. stealing it to make it your own car. I mean, that's 8. I think I got. And there are more. There's insurance fraud. That's 9. So when you study each of these individually, separately, you find that they have different patterns. And that leads to the whole area of crime analysis, because crime analysis helps you get the specifics you need to reduce crime, to advise police, to advise other agencies. And so we now see that studying crime opportunity provides also an opportunity to study um, reduction and how you can reduce crime, but it involves focus. We overwhelmingly see that unfocused theory and unfocused crime ideas lead to weak results. Unfocused policy leads to weak results. Unfocused policing leads to weak results. Unfocused design changes often lead to weak results. So as we get much more focused, we get much more progress. We also have seen great progress in understanding and learning about displacement. We've learned that crime prevented here is not usually displaced there, that usually it isn't displaced. And as a result, we can't, it's wrong to think of crime as a social fact, that's an underlying fact deep in the bowels of society, when in fact, crime is a pretty superficial kind of thing. If you make your new car in Detroit or Yokohama, so it's easily stolen, you can increase the crime rates all around the world. Similarly, if you decrease the crime rates somewhere, improve the way cars are built and make them a little harder to steal, you have a major impact. And so we're finding that a little bit of change leads to a whole lot of crime reduction or increase, depending on the change that's made. Now, there you go, gave you a bunch of things. Now, what I can do, I'm a little disrupted lately because of the floods, but what I can do is, if you tell Professor Lum, give some questions and email them, and she compiles them and sends me an email, I'll try to email an answer, but it might not be for a few days. But thank you very much, and there you go.